I am Jim Reynolds. I attended the University of Colorado after high school and graduated with a degree in nuclear engineering. I had been in ROTC during college, so I entered the U.S. Army after graduation, where I was a second lieutenant in military intelligence. My first 2 years were training jump school at Fort Benning and intelligence training at Fort Bragg. But last 2 years I got to do some actual intelligence work and was promoted to first lieutenant. I enjoyed it so much that I signed up for a second 4 years. Of course, being offered the rank of captain and an increase in pay did not hurt either. During that time, I did some deep intelligence with 2 secret agents from the CIA, who later became good friends. They always dressed in black suits and wore mirrored sunglasses, so I called them my personal men in black. When I left the service after 8 years, I set up my own consulting company and continued to do work for the Department of Defense (DoD) and the CIA. I also do some consulting work for the suppliers to the military. My wife knows very little about my actual work because most of it is classified. I met and dated my wife Anne at the engineering college during our senior year. She graduated with a degree in architectural engineering. We married after our graduation and just before I went into the Army. She moved back east with me while I was in the service and worked for NEIs. When I left, we moved back to Colorado, where I set up my company. She found a nice job with a large architectural firm in Denver, and she loves her work. Anne is a beautiful woman, and I often wonder exactly how I was able to convince her to marry me. She is average height and is a strawberry blonde redhead with a lovely figure. We have always had a great relationship. Anne had dated several people during college until we started dating in our last year of college. She is very open-minded and cares about my needs. We never had any children because of our careers. We both realized that we had not time to give to children and that it would be unfair to bring them into our lives. Monday, it was a perfect day, even if it was a Monday. Work is perfect because I own my own consulting firm, which means that I don't have a boss. I built an addition onto our home for my office so that I can work from home and not fight the traffic getting to work in the city, another reason for it to be a perfect day. My wife of 20 years, Anne, came home from her workplace today and fixed us a wonderful dinner. She is still as beautiful as the day I married her, and she doesn't look her age of 42. Yes, it is a perfect day. My wife appeared to be upset but said nothing. She got up from the table and started collecting the dinner dishes, then putting them in the dishwasher. I didn't want to put up with her negativity, so I got up and went to my office to finish up some work. About 9:30 p.m. I had finished up some reports that were coming due. It is perfect day when you get all your work done. Now it is time to reconnect. I came out of my office and I found my wife watching one of her favorite TV shows. I walked over to the TV and turned it off. I am certain that upset her even more. "Time to go to bed," I said. My wife sat there giving me the "I am angry with you" look. I have had enough of her negative attitude. "Upstairs now," I said. My wife got up and headed for the stairway, and I followed her up. She went into our bathroom and closed the door. We were having a really good time together until she called me by a different name. I paused. Wait, who is she referring to? I immediately stopped and stared at my wife. She opened her eyes to see why I had stopped. "Honey, why did you stop?" Anne said, "You just called me a different name." "Who is that?" I said, feeling upset. "Oh God." "Honey, it was just a mistake. It means nothing." My wife said. "I asked you who that person is," I said angrily. My wife sat up in bed, confused and unsure of what to say. Anne can be very stubborn, and it seemed like she wasn't going to be honest with me. So I got out of bed and grabbed my clothes. I headed downstairs to the kitchen where I dressed. I found my Crocs by the patio door and put them on. My wife came downstairs and walked into the kitchen. I walked over to her and held her by the shoulders. "We are going to have a conversation here at the kitchen table," I said calmly. She looked at me with a frown and didn't move. "Anne, please," I said firmly. She slowly turned around and headed up the stairs. We have a landline mostly for my work at home, but some of our friends call us on it in the evenings and weekends because we don't answer our cell phones when we are not working. We have 2 wireless phones for the landline, one in my office and one in the kitchen. I put the one from my office in my briefcase and closed it. I hurried back to the kitchen with my briefcase. I grabbed the wireless phone from there and put it into my briefcase, which I then set under the kitchen table. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited for my wife. Anne came into the kitchen dressed in jeans, a sweatshirt and bobby socks. "Fix us some glasses of iced tea and let's have a little talk," I said softly. She made 2 glasses of iced tea and put a glass in front of me and put one in front of her as she sat down at the table. We are going to have a discussion. I am not going to get angry or yell, and I don't want you to start complaining. I expect you to tell me the truth, I said quietly and calmly. My wife just stared at me and said nothing. Tell me, who is Tony? I asked. Anne looked down, just staring at her glass of tea, and said nothing. We are going to sit here until you start talking with me, even if it is until tomorrow morning, I said. I have to get some sleep because I have to go to work tomorrow, Anne said. I don't give a darn about your work. Anne, tell me, who is Tony? I asked softly. When I am really angry, I get very calm and I talk softly. It is a skill that I learned while I was in the army when I was interrogating people. Tonight may be another interrogation, but with my wife this time. We sat quietly for several minutes. Anne was staring at her glass of tea and I was staring at her. Anne, since you won't talk to me and since I need to calm down, I am going for a short drive. I will be gone in about 1 hour. During that time, I want you to get your head together so that we can discuss this serious matter. When I get back, I will ask you some questions and I want answers from you, not silence. I have your car keys and all our phones so that you cannot leave and you cannot call anyone, especially Tony. Just sit here and prepare to tell me about him, I said calmly. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the laundry room. I walked into the garage and got into my car. I drove away and headed for a park that was several blocks away. There were no other cars in the park, so I parked in the first spot. I sat there practicing breathing techniques that I used to lower my blood pressure and to calm me down. Who am I angry with? I was angry at my wife because she has never been one to even look at other men. So why mess around now? I decided that I was mostly angry at this Tony person because he seduced my wife. All I could think about was making Tony disappear when I find out who he is. I opened my briefcase and took out Anne's cell phone. I was surprised to find it locked. She had never locked it before. The phone required 4 digits to unlock, so I tried our address. Then I tried the last 4 digits of our landline phone. Then I tried her birthday. Finally, I tried the last 4 digits of her social security number. Bingo. It worked. I looked at her phone call record. There were none and none in the trash folder. Next, I checked her text. There were none and none in the trash. She is keeping her phone clean and locked up. Something is going on. I took out my laptop and started it. I need to get on the internet. There were several hotels in the area, and I found one with free Wi-Fi. I connected to the internet and I logged in as Anne. Anne has a company laptop which she keeps at work, so all her personal social media is done on my desktop computer. Since we both use my computer, I can see all her passwords. I checked Anne's contacts list, but there was no Tony. I looked at her emails and there were none from a Tony. Next, I checked Anne's Facebook page. The first thing I saw was that her messenger icon was lit up, so I clicked on it. Up came a message from Tony Martin dated this morning, and it said, Third one. I scrolled back to the beginning of the Tony messages and found that they started about 8 weeks ago. The first few messages appeared to be compliments to Anne, but about 5 weeks ago the subject matter in the messages changed. There was a message about how good lunch was and how much he enjoyed the special. Following that message, some different messages appeared. The first of the newest messages appeared to be just an address, 3450 Ridge Ave 122, 12 and a time maybe. The rest of the messages were days of the week and numbers, which I figured out were times for those days. So Tony must be her lover, and he is telling her the days and times to meet him at the address, probably his address. It appears that she has met him at his place 6 times and generally at 11:30 a.m. or 12 noon. From the last message, it appears that she is to meet him this coming Thursday at 1 p.m. I intend to not let that happen. Just then a car pulled in behind me and spotlights were shining in my back window. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw a policeman approaching the side of my car. I rolled down my window and greeted the policeman. Good evening. What are you doing here at this hour? He asked. My wife and I had an argument, and I came here to calm down, I said. Yeah, I have to do that too sometimes. You cannot stay here all night. It is against the city ordinances, he said. I will be here in about half an hour more, and then I will go home and face the music, I said. Good idea. Even if you are right, just tell her you are sorry. It works for me, he said, and then returned to his car and left the park. My wife works for a large architectural firm in Denver, so I went to their webpage on the internet. I found the key employees page and started looking for someone named Tony. I saw my wife's photo in her brief bio. She is the manager of their research group. They check out vendors and their products. The very last person in their key employees list was a Tony Martin who was hired about 3 to 4 months ago from a Dallas firm to manage the tenant finish design group. His photo showed a very handsome man with black hair and dark eyes. He was clean-shaven and looked to be younger than my wife and I by maybe 10 years or more. I looked up Tony Martin on Facebook. There were several, but only one was an architect. His cover photo showed him standing beside a new black BMW. He had no photos of a wife or kids on his page. That is odd. I looked about on his page and found out that he was married to a Linda Martin. It was a hot link, so I clicked on it. Her Facebook page showed that she was a very attractive redhead with 2 red-headed young boys. It showed that they lived in Dallas, Texas. There were recent photos of the boys at school, so his wife apparently had not moved to Denver as yet. I opened Google Maps and put in the address from Tony's message to Anne. The address was for an upscale condominium complex. It is all beginning to make sense. I turned off my laptop and put it back in my briefcase. I picked up my wife's cell phone again and looked up her telephone contacts. There was no Tony or Martin, but I found a TM with a phone number and address. The address matched the address in the Facebook message from Tony. I have a burn phone that I keep in my glove compartment for my work. I took it out and called the number for TM. A sleepy-sounding man answered the phone. "I am trying to reach Tony Martin," I said. "I am Tony Martin," he asked. "Do you know Ann Miller?" I asked. "Yes, she works with me." "Who is this?" Tony asked. "I am going to make sure you regret what you did, pal," I said and hung up. This is definitely the guy who is involved with my wife. I put his phone number and address into my cell phone. I had calmed down a lot sitting in the park. I realized that making Tony disappear was a bad idea. I decided to mess with him and then teach him a lesson. I would use some techniques that I learned in the Army. First was sleep deprivation. It makes a person unable to concentrate and makes them easily upset. I could do that by calling him a lot at night. Also, I would do small things to irritate him. Hopefully, the 2 techniques would cause him to believe that someone is after him. When the time is right, I will do something painful to him when he least expects it. I felt that I knew enough about my wife's lover now, so I headed back home. I had been gone a little over an hour. When our overhead garage door opened, I saw the door leading into the laundry room open, and Anne was standing there. I got out of the car with my briefcase and met her at the door. She gave me a quick hug and said, "Honey, I was afraid that you weren't coming back. There is no way that I am going to leave you alone so that you and your Tony can spend all your time together," I said, and moved to the kitchen. I sat down at the table and waited for my wife to sit down. She brought a pitcher of fresh tea to the table and sat down. "Are you ready to talk to me now? I want you to tell me the truth. If you lie, I will know it and the consequences will be very harsh. Do you understand?" I asked. She nodded her head yes. "So tonight when we were spending some time together, you called me Tony?" "Do you remember saying that, Anne?" I asked. She lowered her head and nodded. "Good. Now tell me about Tony," I said. "It was a slip of the tongue. It meant nothing. I am sorry," she said. "Okay, you won't tell me who Tony is, so let's approach this differently. You said, 'Hug me tightly, Tony.' It was so natural for you to say it that you didn't realize you had said it. However, you said it was a slip of the tongue, right?" I asked. "Yes," my wife said. "Well, I believe that you and Tony have spent a lot of time together because it came out of your mouth too easily. You must have said it many times before. I believe that you were fantasizing that Tony was hugging you tightly instead of me. You had your eyes closed and in your mind, it was Tony hugging you. That's why you said it," I said. Anne looked up at me, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "In your mind, it was Tony hugging you and not me. I cannot begin to tell you how hurtful it is to think that you are imagining another man hugging you instead of me. And to make it worse, you called me by his name and not mine. So, Anne, what am I, just someone to give you affection while you dream of Tony? And am I right?" I asked. Anne said nothing but started crying hard. I put my hand under her chin and raised her head so that she could look me in the eyes. "I am going to remind you of something important about our marriage, so I want you to look at me and pay attention. When you married me, you not only gave me your love, but you also gave me your heart, forsaking all others and all that in our vows. Yes, your heart is mine. You carry it around for me so that it is ready when I desire your affection. Likewise, I gave you my heart. It is yours, and I take care of it for you. So your heart was not your property to share with another man. It is mine, not yours. You actually stole my property and used it for your selfish purposes. You took my heart without my knowledge and let someone else have it. And in this state, that is not acceptable. It is called emotional cheating. Do you understand? I asked. Anne just looked at me and said nothing. Her crying had stopped, but her nose was running. Go get some tissues and come back here. We have much to talk about, I said. Anne went into the kitchen and brought back a box of tissues. She wiped her eyes and blew her nose. Now, let's get back to your affair. So, I know that you are spending time with Tony, but you won't tell me about him. I believe that you have feelings for him, and that's why you are protecting him. Since you won't tell me about him, I had to find out about your friend on my own. I know that he is Tony Martin, who lives at 3450 Ridge Avenue, 122. He recently joined your firm to manage the tenant finish group. He used to work for an architectural firm in Dallas, Texas, I said. Anne's face went pale, and her eyes were wide open. How did? Anne started to say, but I interrupted her. Did you know that he was married to a beautiful redhead and they have 2 boys? His wife and kids haven't moved to Denver yet, I said. I saw the ring on his hand, but there was no one living at his condo and no photos of a wife. I thought maybe he was separated or divorced, Anne said. Did you think to ask him? Of course not. You were only interested in spending time with him, I said. Anne just stared at me. How did you? She started to say, but I interrupted her again. So my next question is, when were you spending time with Tony? On the weekends, you and I are together all the time. I even go shopping with you. You come home promptly every night after work, and we spend the evenings together and then we go to bed together. So the only time we are not together is when you are at work. That tells me that you are spending time with Tony during your work hours. Therefore, you must do it over your lunch break, possibly having a longer lunch hour. Is that right? I asked Anne. Yes, Anne replied. My next question is where? I know that you didn't bring him to our home because I am here all day working in my office. So I would guess that you meet him at his condo. Maybe he gave you a key so that you could go over, I said, and I took out Anne's keys from my pocket. This key is for our house. This is your car key. This key is for your work. And this key is for your office door at work. That leaves this key. Is it for his place? I asked. Anne did not answer me but simply nodded her head yes. I put the keys back into my pocket. She was white as a sheet, and her hands were shaking. So my next questions are, how long has this been going on and how many times have you spent time with him? Tony hasn't been in Denver very long, so I would say he started giving you his attention maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago. However, you have only recently started spending time with him, and he is planning to spend time with you again this coming Thursday. Is that correct? I asked. Anne said nothing but had a surprised look. She tried to take a drink of tea, but her hands were shaking so badly that she spilled some on the table. I do not have strong feelings for him. I have strong feelings only for you, Anne said. Where did you? Anne started to say, but I interrupted her again. Anne, did you forget that I worked in military intelligence when I was in the Army? I know where to find information about people, I said. Anne slumped down in her chair. She wiped away the tears with the back of her hand and blew her nose on a tissue. Did you give him hugs and spend a lot of time with him? I asked. Just the first time. We were talking in his car, and I hugged him, but that is all we did at that time during lunch. So I guess you would say that we have spent time together 7 times, Anne explained. But you did hug him when you were at his place, a friendly gesture, but no more. Am I right? I asked. Yes, Anne said. So you could have developed a strong connection with him emotionally. We are both going to have a serious conversation tomorrow morning, I said. Have you got close to me after being with him? I asked. After spending time with him, I always took a shower when I came home. Anne said, did you ever show any signs of affection to me after spending time with him? I asked. No. You and I have only been spending time together on Fridays because Tony couldn't meet me on Fridays. That way I was focused on you, Anne replied. Did you confide in him emotionally? I asked. No. Only you can provide that emotional support for me, Anne said. We have one more thing to discuss tonight, and then we can go to bed. Tomorrow, you will call into work and tell them that you are feeling unwell and won't be coming in the rest of the week. We need some time to talk. Got it? I said. I will call in tomorrow, as you requested. Honey, I am so sorry. Can you forgive me? Anne asked. No, I cannot. I think we are finished for tonight, but I need to run a quick errand right now. You go take a shower and get in bed. I will be back shortly, I said. Where are you going? She asked. You don't have a need to know. Go shower and rest, I said. I locked my briefcase containing my laptop, both of our cell phones, and our 2 landline phones and left it in my office. Then I headed for the garage, where I took out a box cutter from my toolbox. As I drove away from our house, I put Tony's address into the GPS system in my car and saved it as TM. I followed the directions and arrived at a very nice condominium complex. I found the one where Tony lived, 122. I took out Anne's keys and held the mystery key in my hand. I looked for security cameras and saw none. I looked at Tony's door and observed that he did not have one of those doorbells with a camera, so I walked up to his door. The name of the manufacturer on the lock on the door matched the brand name on the key. I put the key into the lock and quietly unlocked his door. Yep, Tony has given my wife a key to his condo. They must be serious about each other. I walked away. When he finds his front door unlocked, it should surprise him. Next, I looked for his car. It was easy to spot because there was only one black BMW, plus it was parked in front of Tony's place and had Texas license plates. I took my box cutter from my pocket and proceeded to cut off the valve stems on his 4 tires, and I put them in my pocket. In seconds, Tony had 4 flat tires. I sat down in my car and called Tony again on my burner phone. Hello, he said. From his voice, I could tell that he was sleeping. You are going to need extra time to get to work tomorrow, so wake up early, I said, and hung up. Between the late-night phone calls, the unlocked front door, and his 4 flat tires, I will definitely get his attention now. I returned home. When I walked into our house, all the lights were out except for the staircase. I went to our bedroom and undressed. I crawled into bed and found Anne was nude and waiting for me. I was worried that you might not come back, she said. I laid down in bed beside her. Does this mean that you are not kicking me out? Anne asked. No, it's just that the guest bed is not made up for you yet. Tomorrow, I want you to remove all the stuff you have put on the bed and make it up because you will be sleeping there, I said, turning on my side with my back to her. Tuesday, the next morning, the alarm went off, so we both got up and dressed. Anne made us a nice breakfast. There was no talking during the meal. When we were finished and Anne had picked up the dishes, I gave her one of our wireless phones and reminded her to call into work. She placed the call and asked to take the rest of the week off as sick leave. I took back the wireless phone because I don't want her communicating with Tony. I need to know that this relationship is finished. There is no more Tony in your life, I said firmly to my wife. She hung her head down and softly said, Yes, it is over. Good. Then we have work to do, I said. I grabbed a handful of our nitrile surgical gloves from the kitchen and put them into my pocket. My wife uses them when she is cooking, especially when she handles meat or veggies. We are going to get a checkup done, and then I have some other things to do, so get your purse, and let's go, I said. I drove us to a nearby urgent care facility where they drew blood for tests. They told us the results would be ready in 3 days. When we got back in the car, I took out my burner phone from the glove compartment and I called Tony at his office. Anne provided his work number. He answered right away. This is Tony Martin. How may I help you? He said. How was your drive to work this morning? I asked and hung up. What was that all about? My wife asked. I think he had car troubles this morning. I wanted to make certain that he was at work and not at home, I replied. Next, I brought up the TM address on my GPS in the car that I had saved last night. When I drove up to Tony's place, Anne became very nervous. Why are we here? She asked. Wait and see, I answered. I parked in front of his car, which still had 4 flat tires. He must have used a taxi or Uber to get to work. I put on the surgical gloves and had Anne do the same. I want no fingerprints. We walked up to his door and I used her key to open the door. Once we were both inside, then I locked the door. I assume you spent time together on his bed. Where is it? I asked. This place is owned by the firm. The master bedroom is locked and reserved for our clients. Tony bought his own bed and put it in one of the other bedrooms, Anne explained. Anne led me upstairs and down a short hallway to the bedroom. All that was in the bedroom was a queen-sized bed and an alarm clock on the floor. I took out my box cutter and sliced open the pillows and spread the filling all around the room. Next, I cut the sheets and blankets into pieces and followed that with slicing open his mattress with a full-sized X. My goodness, honey, what are you doing? My wife asked. I wanted to make certain that you would not be sleeping here Thursday afternoon, I replied. Honey, I told you that it is over. Anne said. I ignored Anne and said, "Show me the bathroom that you guys used." She took me down the hall to a bathroom. It had his and hers sinks with a mirror above each sink. I noticed that on the counter next to one of the sinks were a hairbrush, hairspray, deodorant, an eyebrow pencil, lipstick, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. "You are serious about this guy. You were moving in," I said. "It isn't like that. I had to look good when I went back to work," she said. "Take your stuff with you. Do you have any clothes here?" I said. Anne said, "No," and started to pack all her stuff into her purse. I took her eyebrow pencil and wrote "jerk" on the mirror above his sink and then gave it back to her. I took a wet washcloth and a towel and I started wiping down the bathroom surfaces. Then I did all doorknobs and around the bed. We moved downstairs to the living room. There was just a love seat and a TV on the wall, but no laptop. I wiped everything down in there. Then I moved to the kitchen and did the same. I looked in the refrigerator and saw a couple of beer bottles and a half-gallon of milk and nothing else. I unplugged the refrigerator and hid the cord under the refrigerator. I stuffed some towels that were in the kitchen into the sink drain and then I turned on the water. "That will flood the kitchen," my wife said. "Yes, I know. I think we are done here. Let's go," I said. We left and I locked the door with Anne's key. Next, I drove us to a Walmart and I bought a box of envelopes, a package of pens, and a small notepad. I also went to their hardware department and had a duplicate key made of Tony's door key. Back in my car, I made Anne write a note to Tony that said that she would not be meeting him on Thursday, that the relationship was over, and that she was returning his key as she would no longer need it. We put the note and the original key into the envelope, and Anne put Tony's name on the envelope. I drove to Anne's work and parked nearby. I told her to stay with the car and I took the envelope to the front desk and told them to get it to Tony. We still had our gloves on, so there would be no fingerprints. I drove us home and disposed of the surgical gloves in our garage waste. We went inside and I told Anne to sit down at the kitchen table again. "We haven't finished discussing your relationship. I sense that you have feelings for this guy. Christ. You were planning to move in with him. All you needed were your clothes. When were you going to move them? I want you to look me in the eye and tell me that it is really over," I said firmly. "Oh, honey, I assure you that it is over. The things I had at his place were just so that I looked okay when I went back to work. I had no intention of moving in with him. I love you, not Tony. He was just a romantic fling. It meant nothing. I assure you that it is over," Anne said. I moved to hug her, but she held up her hand to stop me. "I am allowing you to stay here with me because I love you and because I think that something is wrong with you. You have changed a lot recently and have been very difficult to live with. In short, you became difficult. Every time I tried to talk to you, you would get angry with me. That is not normal. Until I found out about the relationship, I have been thinking that you are having a mental problem. I even asked our family doctor if you were well. He assured me that you were physically well, but I worried that maybe something was wrong with your brain because your changes were sudden and intense. When I married you, I agreed to stay with you through sickness and good health, so I saw my job as taking care of you despite how you were treating me. I had no idea that you were involved with someone else and that was causing you to be angry with me. I put most of the blame for your affair on Tony. He is handsome and I am sure that he is persuasive. I am sure that he talked you into this and you were foolish enough to believe the lies he was telling you. He just wanted you in bed and doesn't care about you. I am planning to deal with him. As for you, I was disappointed to see that you had moved into his place. I now understand that the affair was not something that just happened, but rather something that you fully embraced," I said. "Oh dear. I have really messed everything up." "I am sorry," my wife said. "If you were drinking and had too much that resulted in a one-time mistake, I could forgive you. But you slept with him 6 times and you were moving in with him. Christ. This is serious," I said with anger in my voice. "Have there been other mistakes with men as you call them in the past?" I asked. "No, I have only been with you and with Tony since we married," she replied. "Why would you cheat on me?" "Aren't I good enough for you?" I asked. "I don't know why. It started as a friendship and just sort of evolved into something more. I enjoyed it, so I kept going back," she said, crying. "A friendship that developed into being together. You have to have mental issues or else you are just foolish," I said. "Am I going to divorce you?" "It is too soon to make that decision. We have been together 20 years, so there is loyalty on my part. Besides, from the way you have been acting, I believe that there is something wrong with you. I feel obligated to take care of you until you get better, so I am leaving a divorce as an option for now. I am finished for now. Do you have anything that you want to say? I asked. Yes, I do. I am not foolish, but I did use poor judgment. Jim, I have never lied to you about anything. I have always been truthful with you. I never said I was out with friends or shopping when I was with Tony. I never took any time away from you to see him. I did it all on company time. I am salaried regardless of how much time I put into the firm. I have given the firm a lot of free overtime over the years, so I wasn't cheating the firm. Was I going to end it? Yes, I had decided not to see him Thursday, Ann explained. Ann thought for a minute and then said, I know that you are upset with Tony, but what you did at his place seems immature to me. What you saw me do to Tony's place was just one of several things that I have done to bother Tony in the last 24 hours. Each was insignificant, but each was meant to annoy him. When enough of these small, irritating things build up, he will realize that someone is out to get him. Today was meant to show him that he is not safe inside of his condo and that I know that he was with you. I want to create some fear in his life. I want him looking over his shoulder all the time, wondering what or when something else will happen. Wasn't childish, but rather part of a coordinated plan against him, I explained. What other things did you do to him? Ann asked. Some of it is best not discussed, but I will say that I am causing him some trouble, I said. Speaking of sleep, go make up the bed in the guest room. You will be sleeping in there. I went into my office and opened my safe. Let me explain, I have classified documents from time to time, so I have a secure safe in my office. I also keep quite a bit of cash, several cell phones and other items in the safe. I took out a cell phone labeled Fred phone and called my old friend from my army days. I have used him many times to help me with my consulting work. Fred speaking, he said. This is Juliet India Mike Jim. How are you doing? I asked. Hey, good to hear from you, Captain, he said. What's up? He asked. Do you remember what we did to SGT? Lynch when he was causing trouble for all the deployed guys' wives? I asked. Oh yeah, good times. You need another one? He asked. Yes, there is a guy causing problems with my wife and I need you to have a talk with him, I explained. Whoa, I didn't expect to hear that. Guess the guy doesn't know who he is messing with. You want same as before? How serious a talk do you want? Fred asked. I don't want any major consequences, just a serious conversation with lasting impact, I said. I will email you the details on the situation. Send it over. When do you want this talk to happen? Fred asked. Thursday night, I said. I have a key to his place which I will leave at our usual drop location. Do you want me to explain to him why this is happening? Fred asked. No, just let him know that he has been involved with married women, and that is not acceptable, I said. Consider it done, Captain. I will contact another fellow beret for some help. I take it that you don't want to be involved. Fred asked. I will be at a fancy dinner with my wife followed by a Broadway play later on, I said. Understood. Fred standing by, he said, and hung up. I unlocked my briefcase and took out Ann's phone. There were several missed calls from Tony, but no voicemail. I blocked his phone number. I checked her texts and found nothing. Next, I checked Ann's Facebook on my desktop computer. Tony had left her a message, got your key. Are you sure you want to do this? I hope you will show up Thursday so we can discuss. I miss you and want to see you. Of course he wants Ann. She is beautiful and very talented in many ways. However, I want her too, so he must be stopped. I drove to the designated drop location and left Tony's key for Fred. Later that evening, Ann made us a nice dinner and there was very little conversation. I did as you asked. The guest bed is ready, Ann said. You will be sleeping in the guest bedroom for now, I replied. After dinner, Ann watched some TV and I worked in my office. Later, when Ann was upstairs getting ready for bed, I checked her Facebook on the computer in my office. There was a message from Tony. Someone broke into my condo and destroyed everything. They flooded the place too. I will get a new mattress, hoping you will be here Thursday. I need to see you. Since I was logged into my wife's Facebook, I sent him a reply that said my husband found out about us. I told you it was over. I will not be there Thursday. Then I unfriended him and blocked him because I don't want my wife talking to him anymore. I grabbed one of my spare phones and put it into my pocket. When I got upstairs, my wife was brushing her teeth in our bathroom. When she left for the guest bedroom, I hid the spare phone under some towels in the linen closet. As I entered my bedroom, Ann was standing in the doorway. Anne quietly went to the guest bedroom and closed the door. I set my watch alarm for 2 a.m. and went to sleep. When my watch woke me, I silenced it right away because I didn't want to wake Anne. I got out of bed quietly and went into our bathroom. I retrieved the spare phone and called Tony. When he sleepily answered, all I said was idiot and hung up. I hid the phone again and went back to bed. I was depriving Tony of good sleep. I learned that trick while in the army. Lack of sleep will make him edgy and not thinking clearly. I want him to know that someone is after him. All part of the plan. Wednesday was a fairly normal day for us. Anne did some laundry and cooked some meals. I worked in my office all day. I decided to give Anne back her cell phone, but not before I put a tracking app on it. The app would tell my phone exactly where Anne was. When I handed it to her, I told her not to call Tony or she might have to stay in a motel. In the afternoon, I received a call on my spare phone. "Hello, Fred," I said. "We did some scouting last night. Should be an easy job. No cameras anywhere. His car still has flat tires, so we probably cannot use it Thursday. A lady in a Ford Escort came to his door last night around 7 p.m. They talked outside and we used a listening device to pick up some of their conversation. It sounded like he made plans for tonight with her and mentioned a motel. Seems like he has other relationships," Fred said. "Good information that I can use tonight." "Thanks," I said and hung up. Later, Anne served us a nice dinner. Actually, she does that every night. She is an excellent cook and knows what I like to eat. All Anne talked about was her recipes and cooking for us. I didn't say much. After she cleaned up, I told her I wanted to take her for a drive. I drove us over to Tony's condo and parked across the street. "Why are we here? Are you trying to upset me?" Anne asked with anger in her voice. "Well, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but if it bothers you, then sure. I brought you here so you could witness something." "Just watch Tony's place," I said. "You aren't going to do anything, right?" Anne asked. I ignored her. We waited for about 10 minutes until a Ford Escort pulled up in front of Tony's condo. A woman got out and knocked on his door. Tony came out, hugged the woman, and they walked hand in hand to her car and got in. "That's Sherry from work," Anne said. I started my car and followed them. They went to a cheap restaurant and motel across town called the Midway Motel and Restaurant. I've eaten there before, and the food is all right, but the motel side is known for renting their rooms by the hour. Tony got out and went into the office. I took out my phone and turned on the camera app. He came out and held up 2 key cards, then got into the woman's car. They drove to room 110 and parked in front. Tony used one of the cards and opened the door. The woman got out of her car and they both went inside. I took photos of all of it. "Anne, it seems that your lover has other interests besides you. Do you understand why we need to consider testing for STDs?" I asked. "That jerk. Sherry is married," Anne said angrily. "I wonder if he was doing this while he was also involved with you. It's a good thing you decided not to move in with Tony. Besides, he doesn't even have a bed anymore. He has to use a motel for his romantic escapades," I said and laughed. I drove us back home. When we entered our house, Anne slammed the door to the garage and stomped up the stairs. I could tell she was very angry, but I wasn't sure at whom. I let her get ready for bed in our bathroom while I stayed in my office. I opened my safe and took out one of the spare phones, then called Tony's cell phone. It rang and rang until he finally answered it. "What?" he said angrily. "Mr. Martin, this is the Aspen Condo Homeowners Association. We have noticed that you have an abandoned car in front of your place that belongs to you. We do not permit abandoned cars, so we have reported the situation to the police, and they will tow the car within 72 hours if it is not fixed and moved. Good evening, Mr. Martin," I said and hung up. I retrieved my Fred phone and called him. "Fred speaking," he said. "I want the drop-off to be at the Midway Motel and Restaurant, like before I said." "Message received," Fred said and hung up. When I came upstairs to our bathroom, Anne was just finishing her nightly routine. I could tell she was still angry, but I wasn't sure at whom. "I hope you are satisfied now. You have brought Tony and his companion into our lives," she said. "Anne, I am your best friend in the world. I just showed you that your lover is being unfaithful. I guess he doesn't have feelings for you like you have for him. You were just another woman to him. Don't blame me for the message. Your attitude is going to keep you sleeping in the guest room. The bed in the master bedroom is for me and my loving wife, who used to live there. I am hopeful for her return," I said. Thursday, my watch alarm woke me at 1 a.m. I checked on Anne and she was fast asleep in the guest bedroom. I went into the bathroom and retrieved the spare phone from the towel stack. I dialed Tony's number. It rang for some time until he finally answered, out of breath. Ah, they were still together. You know that Sherry is married, idiot, I said and hung up. At breakfast, I could see that Anne had been crying. I didn't say anything to her. She served us breakfast, and after we finished, she sat at the table sipping her coffee and staring at me. I'm sorry for the way I acted last night, she said softly. I wasn't sure who you were angry at, I said. Both of you, she said. Anne, I have planned something special for us tonight. But first, I need you to confirm that your affair is truly over because it felt like you still had lingering feelings for Tony last night, I said. I have already told you it's over. So what are your plans? Something else involving Tony again, she said angrily. Stop your complaining, Anne. I am tired of it. I have dinner reservations at the Brown Palace downtown, and then we will go to a Broadway play at the Denver Theater. I thought I would try to take you on a date tonight, I said. Oh, I am. Anne said, but I interrupted her. I am trying to be nice to you, but you keep criticizing me. You are still angry at me because I showed you that your partner is being unfaithful, just like you were unfaithful to me. Think about that. A cheater cheating on his cheating partner. I was planning on asking you to spend time with me tonight, but your complaining has just turned me off. I have had enough of your complaining over the last few months, and it will end today. You will move all your stuff into the guest bedroom and guest bathroom. Think of it as one step closer to the front door. You will stay there until you figure out how a loyal, faithful wife treats her husband. I cannot cancel the reservations for tonight, so be dressed up and ready at 6 p.m. Now get out of my sight, I said angrily. Anne's face went pale and her eyes were wide. She ran out of the room crying. I worked in my office all day on some reports that were coming due. I didn't see Anne at all, but I heard her moving stuff into the guest bedroom. I did not have reservations for tonight already, so I thought I'd better set them up. I called the Brown Palace and made dinner reservations for 6:30 p.m. And then I called the Denver P.A. Theater and bought 2 tickets to the play Aladdin. Around 3 p.m., I got a call from Fred on my spare phone. Poker party is set for tonight. Do you have any plans? Fred asked. Dinner and a play afterward, I said. Too bad you can't make the poker party. It should be a lot of fun. Our poker game will be done just before midnight. Fred said and hung up. Around 5 p.m., I went upstairs and took a long shower. I shaved again and put on my best suit and tie. I wore some cologne that Anne had bought me. I saw that she was dressed fancy and was putting on makeup in the guest bathroom. At 6 p.m., we left for the Brown Palace. I thought Anne looked very nice and I told her so. She really is a beautiful woman, and I can see why Tony wanted her. I thought maybe Anne would apologize for her complaining, but she said nothing in the car. We had a very fancy dinner and then walked up the street to the theater. After the play, we stopped at Village Inn for some pie and iced tea. We returned home around 1 a.m. I walked Anne to the guest bedroom door. She reached up and put her arms around my neck and hugged me. I had a wonderful time tonight. Thank you, Anne said. I didn't say anything to her, but just stared at her. She hung her head down and said, I am sorry about today. Last night was just such an unexpected surprise, and I handled it all wrong. I am sorry that I misjudged your actions about tonight. You really showed me a good time and how much you care for me. I am sorry I was so difficult. I really love you and want to continue to be your wife. Would you like to spend time with me tonight? Anne asked. Good night, Anne. Sleep well, I said, and went to the master bedroom and closed the door. Friday the next morning, I woke up with Anne giving me a back rub. It is a good day when you start off with a back rub. And I had no intention of stopping her. Then she went to fix us breakfast. Is the old Anne back? After breakfast, I went to my office and checked my emails. There was one from the lab that is performing the tests for STDs. I was 100% clean. But Anne had an infection. The email stated that the infection came from a male other than spouse. The lab suggested she consult with her family doctor. I printed it out and gave it to Anne. I saw her make an appointment on her cell phone with our family doctor. Later that morning, Anne's secretary at work called her with some news. She said that since Anne and Tony were so close, she thought Anne should know about Tony Martin. He was found injured in the parking lot at the Midway Motel and Restaurant around midnight. She told Anne that he has a concussion, a broken jaw, several broken ribs, and a badly damaged left knee. She said that the police believed the attack to be a robbery since his wallet and credit cards were missing. She also mentioned that his wife was flying in later today and the architectural firm was paying for her accommodations and meals. Anne came into my office and told me the conversation word for word. "Did you have anything to do with Tony's injuries? Did you take me out last night just so that you would have an alibi?" Anne asked. "Why would you say such a thing? I took you out on a date. I wanted to do something nice for you in the hopes that we could start to reconcile. I even planned to spend time with you last night. However, your complaining yesterday ruined it for us. And now, here you are complaining at me again. When are you going to learn? I want my old Anne back because I can't stand this version of you," I said. "Oh, honey, I am sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. It just seemed like Tony's injuries were coincidental with you finding out about the affair," Anne said. "I could have caused harm to him, and I would have enjoyed it, but I didn't. Instead, I chose to provoke him so that he would always be on guard, thinking someone was after him. Now, can we please move on from Tony? I really don't want to hear his name again," I explained angrily. "Honey, I am sorry. I didn't mean anything by it, honest. I made a mistake. I am sorry." Anne started to cry. "Anne, you keep getting angry with me. For the past 3 months, you have been difficult most of the time, and I am tired of it. Consequently, I have decided to take this one step further. We are going to separate for a while so that you can clear your head. We will still live here. I will have the master bedroom and bath, and you will live in the guest bedroom and bath. We will eat breakfast together every day, but that will be the extent of our time together. I will have dinner elsewhere, and some nights I may be out late. Don't talk to me unless it is an emergency. You need some alone time to do some deep thinking, and please don't go out in the evenings because that could result in you having to leave and stay at a hotel. During this time of separation, I too will do some deep thinking. Do I want to keep you? Will you still be difficult in the future? Are you worth forgiving?" I said. "Honey, I am sorry. I will do anything to make it right," Anne said, crying. "Anne, one last thing, don't go see him in the hospital. His wife is here, and it is her responsibility to be with him, not yours. But if you do go to see him in the hospital, don't come back home. Trust me. I will know. You won't be able to hide it from me. You won't need to come get your things because I will get rid of everything you own. I have been too kind to you, but your attitude has ruined my efforts to reconcile with you just now," I said. Later that afternoon, I called Fred on my separate phone. "Captain, sir," he said. "I heard the poker party went well," I said. "You missed a good time," he said. "How much did I lose?" I asked. $950 should cover your losses. Can you give it to me mostly in 20s? He asked. "I will leave it at our usual drop-off location," I said. I finished printing out some of the photos from my phone of Tony with his date. I wrote 2 letters, printed them out, and put a couple of photos inside each envelope. I labeled each envelope with a name. For my next errand, I needed to look official like a process server. I went to my bedroom and dressed in a white shirt with a dark tie. I selected a tweed suit jacket to wear. I took $950 in cash out of my safe and locked it. I drove up towards Boulder and left the money in our usual drop-off spot. Afterwards, I drove to the hospital where Tony was being treated. I put on colored glasses to complete my attempt to look official. I went into the hospital and asked for Tony's room. When I got to his room, a red-headed woman was sitting in a chair beside the bed. Tony was sleeping and had various tubes and wires hooked up to him. His head was covered in bandages. I put my hand on the redhead's shoulder and then handed her the envelope with Linda written on it. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said and left. She turned to say something, but I was already gone. She opened the envelope and read the letter, "Dear Linda Martin, it is with great sadness that I inform you that your husband has been involved with married women from his office. He was found lying in the parking lot of the motel where he met them. I suspect that an angry husband has sent Tony a message. The police believe it was a robbery, and it may be best to let them continue believing that. It will keep his affairs out of the media. You don't have to believe this letter, so I attached photos for you. They were taken at the same motel where Tony was found. If I were in your shoes, I would want someone to tell me." Next, I drove to Anne's workplace and took the other envelope to the receptionist. It was addressed to Lionel Miller, the CEO and founder of the architectural firm. His letter read, "Dear Mr. Miller, your new employee, Tony Martin, has been involved in inappropriate relationships with some of the married ladies in your firm. If you have a policy against dating coworkers, he is breaking it, and you are not enforcing it. Tony will cause financial strain with potential lawsuits from the husbands. Is he worth the financial burden and negative attention to your renowned firm? These women are not at fault and should not lose their jobs because Tony might be blackmailing them. He is highly skilled at charming married women, and I suspect this isn't his first time doing so. He was found beaten in front of the motel where he meets some of the women. Perhaps an angry husband sent him a message. The police believe it was a robbery for his money. To minimize any negative publicity about your firm, let them continue to believe that. However, you should discreetly conduct an internal investigation. Enforce your policy against office relationships in the future. One of the photos shows Tony standing in front of the room that he used on Wednesday, and you can see one of your married female employees approaching him to talk. I decided to go for a nice meal at the Texas Roadhouse. After dinner, I stayed at the bar sipping on several sodas and watched a college football game on the TV. I arrived home at 10:30 p.m. and went straight to my bedroom, expressing my dissatisfaction by closing the door loudly, making sure Anne knew I was home. The next week seemed to go slowly. Anne had gone back to work, but I sensed that there was tension at her office. Everyone knew that she and Tony were dating, and now Tony had been beaten up. I suspect that there was a lot of gossip. To make matters worse, there was an investigation at her work regarding Tony. Anne was called before the HR director and the architectural firm's lawyer twice, and she was worried about keeping her job. The severity of her relationship was starting to get to her. Every morning when Anne left for work, she would come to my office door and say goodbye. She had stopped doing that several months ago, probably when she started seeing Tony. I knew where Anne was every moment of the day thanks to the app on her phone. Once she arrived at work, she stayed there. At the end of the workday, she always left work promptly, and occasionally she would do the grocery shopping on her way home. Once she was home, she did not leave again. Anne tried several times to talk with me, but I just walked away from her. She always started off by saying, "I'm sorry," which got old. On Tuesday evening of that week, 2 police detectives came to our house. They explained to both my wife and I that in their investigation, they discovered that Tony was having romantic relationships with some of the women at the architectural firm. They first talked with Anne alone. She later told me that they just wanted confirmation that she was having romantic relations with Tony. She admitted it and told them that I knew about it. Next, they asked her where she was Thursday night, and she told them about our date that night. They also asked her if her husband and me would do anything to get back at Tony. She told them no, that I wasn't like that. When they talked with me alone, they wanted to know where I was that Thursday night. I told them about our date that night. I showed them the bill for dinner and the ticket stubs for the play. They asked me if I knew about the affair, and I said that I had just found out. They wanted to know what I was going to do about it. I explained to them that we were trying to work through it, but divorce was still on the table. They asked me if I had any plans for Tony. I told them that I was seeing a lawyer about suing the architectural firm for millions because of Tony. I assured them that I had no intention of hurting Tony because of the upcoming lawsuit. They asked me if I knew anyone or another husband who wanted to hurt Tony. I told them I didn't know any of the other husbands. We never heard any more from the police. Friday, first week today, I needed to mess with Tony's mind again. When we were doing difficult interrogations in the military, we used the old good cop vs. bad cop technique. The bad interrogator would dress up in a nice suit with all the bells and whistles to let the person know that he was in charge, and he explained all the bad things that could happen to the person if he didn't cooperate. Later, the good interrogator would come in wearing casual clothes, and he would treat the person in a more relaxed manner. He was usually successful in obtaining information. So to deal with Tony, I needed to be the bad cop. I put on my dark suit, white shirt and dark tie, and mirrored sunglasses. I went to the safe and put my favorite pocket knife in the holster on my belt. Yes, I have a concealed permit to carry. It may be childish playing like I am one of the men in black, but my intent was to put an image of fear in Tony's mind. I drove to the hospital where Tony was being treated. I went to his room and closed the door. There was no wife present. Tony was sitting up in bed, and the bandages on his face were gone, and most of the tubes and wires were no longer attached to him. I knew that his jaw was wired shut and that he could not talk. He looked shocked and upset when he saw me. I am certain that he thought the men in black were coming to get him. "Tony, I know that you cannot talk, so I will not ask any questions," I said, and walked up close to his bed. "I see that you recognize my outfit. The agency that I work for takes care of problems that concern the officials in Washington, D.C. You and I have never met. I am Anne's husband. I know that you know Anne because you both work at the same place, plus she has been seeing you in your condo. I hear that your bed was destroyed. I guess you won't be seeing anyone there very soon. I understand that 2 men gave you a message about being involved with other people's spouses. I think I would pay attention to their message because the next time could be serious, I said. I unbuttoned my suit coat and pulled it back to expose my pocket knife. Tony's eyes were wide and he was shaking his head no. I want you to know that I did not do this to you because Anne and I were out on a date with lots of witnesses. By the way, I wouldn't tell the police about our little talk because the police believe that it was a robbery. I just wanted to see how you were doing. I noticed that your wife is not here with you. Maybe she found out about your relationships, I said. I reached in my coat pocket and drew out the 4 tire valve stems that I had cut off Tony's tires. I dropped them in his lap. I found these and thought you might want them, I said. Then I leaned close to his ear and said softly so only he could hear me, I am going to be keeping an eye on you every day. I will know everything that you do. You have no place to hide. I hear that inside of your condo isn't even safe. If I were you, I would be very careful after you leave this hospital. Those 2 guys might still be looking for you, but I would not know anything about that. Maybe you should move to another state to live. I hear the sunshine and the beaches are nice. Have a good day, I said. I emphasized my last point by holding my coat back so that he could get another look at my pocket knife, and then I left his room. I drove past Tony's condo and noticed that his BMW was missing. The car still had flat tires when Tony entered the hospital and now it is gone. I bet his wife had the tires fixed and that she drove it back to Texas. The second week was very hard on Anne. I could tell that she wasn't eating enough and she was not sleeping well. At breakfast, I could see that her eyes were red and she had dark areas below her eyes. She never smiled anymore. We would eat breakfast every morning, but we did not speak. She would come to my office door and tell me goodbye when she left for work. I don't know what she did when she came home after work because I made certain that I was gone. I would eat dinner at some restaurant and then walk through stores until 8:30 or 9 p.m. I don't drink, so I never went to any bars, and I have no interest in pursuing relationships. Afterward, I would drive home and go directly to my bedroom. Friday, second week, I had received an email from Fred that Tony was being discharged this afternoon about 4 p.m. I put on my men in black clothes and my pocket knife on my belt again and drove to the hospital. I sat on a bench just outside the main doors. When an Uber car showed up, I assumed that Tony would be coming out, so I walked over to the side of the Uber and watched for Tony. The hospital doors opened automatically and a nurse was pushing Tony in a wheelchair toward the Uber. I stepped up and opened the rear door of the car for Tony. When he saw me, his body jerked and he turned to the nurse and was trying to say, "No, no, no," with his wired jaw. "Tony, just relax. I will be keeping an eye on you every hour of every day," I said, smiling. He walked with a noticeable limp and had difficulty climbing into the back seat. I deliberately pulled my suit coat back so that Tony could see my pocket knife. As I was closing the door, I said, "You have a nice day." The Uber drove off and the nurse said to me, "He is pretty messed up, so I am glad that you will be looking after him." "Yes, Ma, I am. You have a good day," I replied. I nodded to her and went to my car. I took off my dark suit coat and tie and drove to one of my favorite restaurants. I returned home about 7 p.m. and went straight to my bedroom to read for a while. Monday, third week, my wife called me and told me that 3 of the top people at her firm were going to visit Tony, the firm lawyer, the director of HR, and the VP of operations. She said they had just left, but she didn't know why they wanted to see him. She found out later that they made him sign a lot of paperwork and then fired him. The condo belonged to the architectural firm for visiting clients, so they gave Tony 1 week to move out. Weeks 3 and 4 passed and Anne had stopped trying to talk with me. We ate breakfast together and she always told me goodbye when she left for work, but that was all. During the day, we both worked. In the evenings, I ate out and returned sometime in the evening. Thursday, 5th week, since I wouldn't talk to her, Anne Hand wrote a short letter on Thursday and taped it to my bedroom door. It read, "My dear husband, I have tried to talk with you, but you have just shut me out. I am very sorry for the mistake and for my actions when I found out that Tony was attacked. I was very wrong in how I handled everything. I have had some time to think about everything. I had told myself that it was just a friendship with Tony, but I discovered that you cannot spend a lot of time with someone and not have some feelings for them. I can see that the feelings were only one way: he only wanted me as a friend. Although I told you that it was over, I found that I couldn't suppress my feelings like a light switch, but you showing me that Tony was seeing someone else helped me get over him. I am sorry how I acted about that. I made Tony part of my past, just as the friends I had before I met you are in the past. I never think about any of them, and Tony is now in the same category. I realize that I have hurt you with this mistake. That was something that I did not consider at the time. I admit that I was only thinking about me. I have distanced myself from Tony and am trying to forget about him, but I know that you cannot put my mistake into the past and forget about it. I betrayed you, and you have lost your trust and probably your love for me. I made a huge mistake getting involved with Tony. He is very friendly and much younger than I am. When he started paying attention to me, I fell for it. He said nice things about me as a person and how I dressed. He was clearly trying to win me over, and I was too naive to see it. However, I will not use that as an excuse for my mistake. I participated in it, and I take full responsibility for it. I realize that you are uncertain about me being your wife anymore, and I do understand why. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would probably treat you worse than you have treated me. I don't think I realized how badly I have been treating you. I didn't realize that I was being so unkind. I would like for us to set aside a time for us to have a discussion. All I am asking for is a one-time discussion to get everything off both of our chests. A chance to say everything, holding back nothing. Clear the air. We can talk non-stop for 24 hours if you want, but at least let us have one opportunity to talk until we have said everything. If you still want to separate from me afterward, then I will understand and accept it. Whether you separate from me or not, please at least allow me to live with you. I will be the best person to cook, clean, be your companion, and be there for you whenever you need support. I need to feel close to you, and I know that you must be hurting too. I will make myself available to you emotionally and physically at any time you want, and you may do anything that you need. No strings attached. You don't even have to talk to me. You don't have to sleep with me, but I hope you would consider it. I miss being close to each other and waking up together. I love you more now than I did the day I married you. I am finding how much I depend upon you and how much I need you in my life. I hate myself for what I have done to you, and I feel so alone that it's overwhelming. With all my love, Anne. I read the letter several times, and I admit the big tough guy inside of me shed tears. I admit that I had not thought much about reconciliation or a separation yet. Actually, I was avoiding thinking about Anne's mistake. I do believe that it was 90% Tony's fault, and by addressing him, that would solve most of the problem. However, Anne needed to learn a lesson, and that is why I arranged the time apart. Anne needed time to reflect on her mistake and to get over her unkind behavior, which I believe was caused by her interactions with Tony. I decided that I would talk with her on the upcoming Saturday. I put a note on the guest bedroom door that said simply talk Saturday after breakfast. Friday 5th week, I arrived home at about 8 p.m. Anne was sitting on her bed reading a book. I stopped in the doorway and held up her note. I walked into her room, and I put my arms around her and let her cry against my chest. I am sorry. I just can't seem to get anything right. Anne said, "Honey, I am trying so hard, but..." She didn't finish her sentence and just cried. "Anne, pull yourself together," I said. She didn't take a very long shower but showed up at my bed. I do not know what time we finally fell asleep holding each other, but it was in the early morning hours. Saturday 5th week, Anne was up before me. I smelled bacon cooking, so I got up and dressed. When I got to the kitchen, Anne was serving a big breakfast with eggs, bacon, potatoes, and waffles. Anne seemed happier than I had seen her in months. I heard her humming, and she smiled at me a lot. We didn't talk much during breakfast, except Anne said, "Thank you for last night." Afterward, she cleaned up the dishes and then joined me at the table with her cup of coffee and a notepad. "You asked me in your letter to meet with you so that we could talk, so go ahead. Tell me what is on your mind," I said. Anne's discussion: we couldn't see each other every day because of his work commitments, so it was random when we went to his place. He wouldn't tell me until the morning that he wanted to spend time together. He gave me the key to his place, hoping that I could come over on weekends. I never intended to meet him on weekends. On the days he wanted to meet, I would leave work a few minutes before him and drive to his place. Since I had a key, I could go inside and get ready for him. He would then join me. The affair was absolutely finished when I accidentally called you Tony. That night, I desperately wanted to tell you everything so that I could stop hiding the affair. But I saw how angry you were. I became afraid of you, and for the first time, I was afraid that you might hurt me. I had never seen you so angry. As for me being difficult, it all started when I started having lunches with Tony. At first, I wanted to spend a lot of time with him, but couldn't because I was here with you. That made me angry and I took it out on you. Later on, I felt guilty and I hated myself for what I was doing. Now I realized that I was angry at myself and not you, but I transferred my anger to you. I am sorry for the way I treated you. With Tony out of our lives, especially mine, there is no reason for me to be difficult with you. I can get back to being the old Anne that you love. I am confused about how you feel about me. Sometimes you are angry with me, but then you took me on that wonderful date, and I thought that maybe you had forgiven me and we could go back to being a couple. But then my negative side pissed you off, and you have asked me to sleep in a separate room. I don't know if we are getting back together or getting a divorce. Regardless, I hope that you will consider my offer to continue living with you, as I said in my letter to you. I want to say to you that I regret everything that I did with Tony, even the lunches at work. I guess I agree with you that I was foolish. I am very sorry for the pain and hurt that I have caused you. I have felt the lack of trust that you have for me, and I do not blame you. I can say that after all this, there is no way I would ever look at another man whether we are together or not. I want you to know that I love you dearly and I will do anything to get us back together again. There. I have said what I wanted to tell you, and it feels good to get it off my chest. Thank you for being willing to let me talk with you. You have been very understanding and patient. Anne, I have one question. How do I know that this won't happen again when the next attractive young guy starts giving you compliments? I asked. This whole experience has scared me so much. I never want to go through this again. I made a promise to myself to only be with you and no one else. Even if you divorce me, I will not be with another man. I would rather be single for the rest of my life, Anne replied. Jim's discussion, Anne, I'm not sure if I needed to hear all those details, but I understand that you needed to get it out. Now that we've shared everything, let's not discuss it again, and let's never mention Tony's name again. That night you called me Tony. I was angrier than I've ever been. I was angry with you because you cheated on me. I never thought it would happen to us. But it did. I was angry at Tony because I blamed him for the affair and wanted to hurt him. But most of all, I was angry at myself. It hurt me deeply that I had no clue about your affair. When I saw that you had moved some of your things into his place, I thought our marriage was over and I wanted to hurt both of you. But I calmed down, I explained. Oh my goodness. I had no idea. Anne said, for the past few months, you've been really difficult to live with. You were often angry with me and spoke harshly to me, which is not like you at all. I couldn't understand what I was doing wrong. I thought there might be something wrong with you, either physically or mentally. I even consulted our family doctor a couple of months ago. He said there was nothing physically wrong with you, but he couldn't comment on your mental state. Your change in personality made me wonder if you had some mental health issues, and I didn't know how to address it without you getting defensive. So, Anne, I won't tolerate your difficult behavior anymore. If you say something harsh to me again, just think about which hotel you want to stay in the next day. If it continues, I will file for divorce, I stated. Anne, if we are considering getting back together, then there are important things we must discuss. Your actions have hurt me, and there will be consequences. I will be sleeping in the master bedroom, and you will be sleeping in the guest bedroom, until I say otherwise. In order to rebuild the trust I have lost in you, I will need to know your whereabouts and activities at all times. You will call me every day when you arrive at work. You will call me every day when you leave work and inform me of any stops on your way home. I will ask that you don't have lunch with any men unless another woman is present. Once a week, you will unlock your phone and let me see it, ensuring that you haven't deleted any phone calls or texts before I have reviewed them. If you are not willing to do any of these things, then divorce may be the only solution. I am tired of living the way we have been. I do not have to accept that. Do you understand? I asked. Yes, I do. I should have been doing all these things throughout our years of marriage. You can even put a tracker on my car to know where I am if you want. I agree with all of it. Anne said. We both got up from the table and embraced each other. I think we both had tears in our eyes. Honey, look at me. I see something in your eyes. I think you're very excited because your eyes are sparkling. Anne said, giggling. Epilogue, according to his neighbors, Tony left in a rented U-Haul truck within a week after he returned home from the hospital. The neighbors mentioned that Tony had a noticeable limp and had to use a cane while loading the truck. I'm not quite sure where he went, and I honestly don't care. His wife must have divorced him because she is listed as having no relationship on her Facebook page. As you can tell, Anne and I resolved our issues. After an additional week of separation, I allowed her to move back into our bedroom. She is almost back to the person I married years ago. She is no longer unpleasant. In fact, she is happy and smiling all the time. Occasionally, she gets a little upset about something, but not to the extent it used to be. It seems that every day now is a perfect day.